My sister watched me across the dinner table, eyes gleaming, waiting for me to realize the $5,000 in my room was gone. She wanted a meltdown. She wanted proof that I was the family failure. But when I finally looked at her, I did not cry. I smiled. She thought she had pulled off the perfect heist, but she had no idea she just walked straight into my trap. My name is Brooke Martin. I am 33 years old, and if you asked anyone within the city limits of Greenville, South Carolina, they would tell you that I am a drifter. They would tell you that I am still finding myself. They would tell you with a pitying tilt of their heads that I have never quite managed to match the glittering potential of my younger sister, Tessa. I sat at the mahogany dining table, the wood polished to a mirror shine that reflected the distorted faces of my family, and I listened to my father dismantle my dignity for sport. It was the third night of my visit. The air in the house was thick with the scent of roasted pine and cinnamon, the kind of aggressive holiday cheer that usually masks a deep festering rot. There were 12 of us at the table. My parents Tessa, her boyfriend Gavin, my Aunt Linda, Uncle Ted, their son Jade, and a few neighbors who had been dragged into the performance. And make no mistake, it was a performance in the Martin household. You were either the audience or the prop. I had been the prop for as long as I could remember. Grant Martin, my father, cleared his throat. It was a sound that commanded silence, a heavy, wet rumble that stopped all conversation about high school football and local zoning laws. He held his wine glass by the stem, swirling the red liquid dangerously close to the rim. He started, his voice booming with that false jovial baritone he reserved for an audience. I was talking to Jim over at the dealership yesterday. He's looking for a receptionist part-time. I told him I might know someone. The table went quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. I carefully cut a piece of my roast beef. I kept my eyes on the knife, watching the blade slide through the meat. "I have a job, Dad?" I said, my voice low and even. "A job?" He scoffed, looking around the table to ensure everyone was in on the joke. "Brooke calls freelancing a job. I call it a hobby that does not pay the rent. We are just worried about you. Honey, you are 33 by your age. I had a mortgage and 2 kids. Tessa here just opened her second studio location. Did she not? Or is it the third?" He turned his beaming gaze toward Tessa. My sister sat across from me, glowing. She was beautiful in that sharp manicured way that required 3 hours of preparation to look effortless. She was wearing a cashmere sweater that I knew cost $600 because I had seen the charge notification on a shared family alert system nobody knew I still monitored. "It is just the one studio, Daddy," Tessa said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweetness. She reached out and touched his hand. "But we are expanding services, high-end event planning. It is going really well. But let us not talk about me. I do not want to make Brooke feel bad." There it was. The pivot. The masterful way she centered herself by pretending to step aside. "Nobody is making Brooke feel bad." My mother, Darlene, chimed in. She was frantically smoothing the linen napkin on her lap, her eyes darting between my father and the guests. My mother was a woman who would rather swallow glass than witness an awkward silence. Her method of dealing with conflict was to pretend it was not happening, or better yet, to smile until her face muscles spasmed. Grant passed the potatoes to Linda. "Brooke, do you want more gravy? You look thin. Are you eating enough in that apartment of yours?" "I am fine, Mom," I said. "She looks thin because stress burns calories," Tessa said, taking a sip of her wine. She looked at me over the rim of the glass. Her eyes were not smiling. They were calculating. "It must be hard, Brooke, not knowing where the next check is coming from. If you need a loan, you can ask. We are family. You do not have to let pride get in the way." The table murmured in agreement. So generous, they whispered. Tessa is such a sweetheart. I felt a familiar heat rising in my chest, a mixture of shame and rage that used to bring me to tears when I was 20. They had crafted a narrative for me, a tailored suit made of failure. And they forced me to wear it every time I walked through the door. They needed me to be the failure. If I was the failure, then their golden child looked brighter. If I was the chaos, then their dysfunction looked like order. But I was not 20 anymore. What they did not know, what none of them knew, was that I was not freelancing. I was the founder and CEO of Northline Systems, a back-end logistics software company that had just closed a contract worth $4 million with a shipping conglomerate in Seattle. I owned my apartment in Atlanta outright. I drove a car that cost more than my father's precious truck. But I never told them. I learned a long time ago that in this house, good news from me was treated like a lie, and success was treated like an insult. If I told them I was rich, they would either not believe me or worse, they would feel entitled to it. So I stayed silent. I chewed my roast beef. I looked at Tessa, really looked at her. I saw the slight tremor in her hand as she sat down her wine glass. I saw the way her pupils were slightly dilated. I saw the way she glanced at her boyfriend, Gavin, who was staring at his plate like he wished he could dissolve into the floorboards. My sister was desperate. I could smell it on her like cheap perfume. I appreciate the offer, Tessa, I said finally. My voice was calm, devoid of the defensive snap they were waiting for. But I am managing. Managing? My father snorted. That is the word of the decade. Well, when you are done managing and ready to start working, let me know. Jim is not going to hold that desk forever. The dinner dragged on for another 2 hours. I endured the questions about my love life non-existent. According to them, my wardrobe too plain and my future bleak. Through it all, I observed. I watched who drank too much. I watched who avoided eye contact. I watched the way Tessa's phone lit up on the table every 5 minutes and the way she aggressively flipped it over without checking the screen. When the guests finally left and the dishes were cleared, I retreated to the guest room. It was not really a guest room. It was the downstairs den with a pull-out sofa that smelled of dust and old potpourri. My parents had turned my old bedroom into a walk-in closet for Tessa's off-season wardrobe years ago. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the sofa. The house was quiet now, settling into the heavy silence of the night. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I opened my suitcase. It was a Tumi carry-on. Simple, black, expensive, but understated enough that my parents just thought it was a knockoff. I reached into the lining and pulled out a plain white envelope. Inside the envelope was $5,000 in cash. I had withdrawn it 2 days ago from a bank in Atlanta. I had a specific purpose for it. It was not a gift. It was a test. I fanned the bills out on the bedspread. 50 bills, $100 each. It was a significant amount of money to leave lying around, but not so much that it would look like a bank heist. It looked like savings. It looked like emergency money. It looked like exactly the kind of cash a desperate, unemployed woman might hoard in her room because she did not trust banks or was planning to run away. I placed the envelope on the small side table next to the sofa. I did not hide it. I did not bury it under clothes. I left it right there next to a lamp and a half-read paperback novel. Then I took a picture of it with my phone, capturing the timestamp 11:45 at night. I turned off the light and lay down, but I did not sleep. I listened. The house creaked. I heard my father's heavy footsteps going up the stairs. I heard the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. And then about an hour later, I heard the soft click of the den door handle. I kept my breathing steady. I lay facing the wall, my body curled under the thin quilt. The door opened slowly. A sliver of hallway light sliced across the floor. Someone stepped into the room. They were trying to be quiet, but the floorboards near the sofa were treacherous. A soft creak, a pause, the rustle of fabric. I could feel their presence near the side table. I could feel the air shift, then the sound of paper sliding against wood. The intruder hesitated for a moment, perhaps checking to see if I would stir. I did not move a muscle. I forced my heart rate to stay low, a trick I had learned in high-stakes boardroom negotiations. Let them take it, I thought. Take it and seal your fate. The footsteps retreated. The door clicked shut. I waited another 10 minutes before I rolled over. I checked the side table. The envelope was gone. I stared at the empty space in the darkness, and I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction settle in my gut. It was done. The trap was sprung. The next morning, the house was a flurry of activity. My mother was in the kitchen making pancakes, the smell of burnt butter and batter filling the air. My father was at the table reading the local paper, grumbling about property taxes. I walked into the kitchen at 8 o'clock in the morning. I was dressed in jeans and a gray sweater, my hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. "Morning," I said. My mother looked up, smiling that tight, anxious smile. "Good morning, Brooke. There is coffee. Do you want pancakes? I made blueberry." "Coffee is fine," I said. I poured myself a mug and leaned against the counter. That was when Tessa walked in. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that concealer could not quite hide. But her energy was high, nervous high. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a steaming mug of tea. She stopped when she saw me. She scanned my face, searching for the red eyes, the blotchy skin, the trembling lip. She was waiting for the explosion. She was waiting for me to scream, "Someone stole my money," so she could gasp and say, "You probably lost it. You are always so careless." And my father could shake his head and say, "This is why you have no savings, Brooke." She walked over to the island and stood opposite me. "Sleep okay?" she asked. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were predatory. "Fine," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "The sofa is a little lumpy, but I slept like a rock." Tessa frowned slightly. She glanced at the hallway leading to the den, then back at me. "You seem chipper." "It is the holidays," I said. "Why wouldn't I be?" She drummed her manicured fingernails on the granite countertop. Click, click, click. She could not help herself. She needed the reaction. She had stolen $5,000 from her struggling, unemployed sister, and the victim was standing there drinking coffee like nothing had happened. It did not make sense to her. "Did you check your things?" Tessa asked. "I saw your suitcase was open when I walked by earlier to get water. I just wanted to make sure nothing fell out. You know how messy you can be." "I checked," I said, and she leaned in, her eyes wide. "And everything is exactly where it should be." I lied. Tessa froze for a split second. The mask slipped. Pure confusion washed over her face. She knew the money was gone because she was the one who had it. She likely had it tucked in her purse or hidden in her room right now. If I said everything was fine, it meant one of two things. Either I was so rich that $5,000 did not matter, or I was playing a game she did not understand. And since she was convinced I was destitute, her brain could not process the information. "Are you sure?" she pressed, her voice rising an octave. "Maybe you should check again, just to be safe. We have had cleaners in and out. Not that I am accusing anyone, but you can never be too careful with cash. If you had any cash," I set my mug down slowly. I looked her dead in the eye. I let the silence stretch out. Let it become heavy and uncomfortable. My father lowered his newspaper. My mother stopped flipping pancakes. They sensed the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden drop in temperature. "Tessa," I said softly, "why are you so worried about my money?" I am not, she snapped too quickly. I am just trying to be a good sister. God. Brooke, you are so defensive. This is why nobody can talk to you. I am not defensive, I said. I let a small smile curl the corners of my lips. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who has just watched the prey step into the snare. I just think it is funny. I thought I misplaced something earlier. A white envelope. But then I realized I must have put it somewhere safe. Or maybe I spent it. Who knows? You do not know if you lost money, Tessa stammered. Who loses money and does not know? People who aren't worried about it, I said. I pushed off the counter and walked past her. As I brushed by, I leaned in close so only she could hear. Besides, it is just paper, Tessa. It is what else was in the envelope that matters. I did not wait for her response. I walked into the living room and sat down on the armchair, picking up a magazine. I could feel her staring at my back. I could feel the panic starting to spark in her chest. She was wondering what I meant. She was mentally replaying the theft, wondering if she had missed something inside the envelope, wondering if she had checked the contents thoroughly before shoving it into her hiding spot. She hadn't. I knew she hadn't. Tessa was greedy, and greedy people look at the sum, not the details. She had taken the bait. She had taken the money, and in doing so, she had given me exactly what I needed. My father huffed from the table. What is all the whispering about, Tessa? Come sit down and eat. Brooke. Stop being cryptic. It is annoying. Coming, Daddy, Tessa said. Her voice was shaky. I turned a page of the magazine. It was a lifestyle catalog featuring high-end watches. I smiled at the glossy page. Go ahead, Tessa. I thought spend it, hide it, deny it. It does not matter. The game had officially begun. And for the first time in my life, I was not playing by their rules. I was the one writing them. To understand why I smiled when my sister stole $5,000 from my room, you have to understand the architecture of my childhood. You have to understand that in the Martin household, reality was never determined by what actually happened. Reality was determined by what looked best on a Christmas card. For 33 years, I have been the family mechanic and Tessa has been the family ornament. The dynamic started before I could even read. I was the child who learned to tie her shoes at 3 years old because I realized early on that my mother had no patience for knots. I was the one who memorized the bus routes so I would not be late for school when my father overslept. I was the one who fixed the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom when I was 16 because calling a plumber was too expensive. Yet, my father had just bought Tessa a new wardrobe for her homecoming dance. When I fixed that faucet, my father did not say thank you. He looked at my hands, stained with grease and smelling of rust, and he frowned. He told me that I had rough hands. He told me that no husband would want to hold a hand that looked like it belonged to a laborer. But when Tessa walked into the room 10 minutes later, holding a single flower she had plucked from the garden, a flower I had planted, watered, and fertilized, my mother gasped. She told Tessa she had the soul of an artist. She told the neighbors that Tessa had a natural gift for bringing beauty into the world. That was the rule. I did the work, and Tessa provided the aesthetic. If I got an A on a calculus exam, my parents would ask why I did not have more friends. If Tessa failed a history test, they would blame the teacher for being boring and stifling her creative spirit. I learned to stop seeking their approval by the time I was 12. It is a hard thing for a child to turn off that valve. The biological imperative to please the people who made you. But I did it. It was a survival mechanism. If I did not care what they thought, they could not hurt me. So I left. I moved out the day after I graduated high school. I did not ask for tuition money. I did not ask for rent. I worked double shifts at a diner and took night classes. I taught myself coding on a refurbished laptop that was missing the K key. I clawed my way up from the bottom of the tech world, fueled by a mixture of caffeine and the icy determination to never ever need Grant or Darlene Martin for anything. My family, of course, rewrote this history. In their version of the story, I was the wayward daughter. I was the one who abandoned the family nest because I was unstable. They told the aunts and uncles that I was struggling to find my footing when I switched jobs to take a higher position. They told people I had been fired. When I moved into a nicer apartment, they assumed I had a roommate I was hiding because I could not afford it on my own. They needed me to be a failure. Took me a long time to understand why. It is simple, really. If I am successful, then their entire system of judgment is flawed. If the daughter they criticized is actually doing better than the daughter they worshiped, then they made a mistake. And people like my parents, people who value face over blood, would rather see me destitute than admit they backed the wrong horse. The truth, the one I hold close to my chest like a winning poker hand, is that I am the founder of Northline Systems. Northline is not a sexy company. You will never see us on the cover of Forbes. We do not make flashy apps or social media platforms. We build back-end logistics software for maritime shipping. We make the code that ensures a container of electronics, leaving Shenzhen arrives in a warehouse in Memphis without getting lost in the ether. It is boring. It is invisible. And last year we did $12 million in revenue. I have 40 employees. I have a corner office overlooking the Atlanta skyline. I have a retirement fund that could buy my parents' house 3 times over. But when I come home to Greenville, I am just Brooke the Drifter. I am Brooke who does something with computers. I am Brooke who needs to be reminded to eat. I never correct them. I used to try. Years ago, I showed my father a paycheck. He glanced at it, shrugged, and said that taxes would eat most of it anyway and asked if it was a contract position. He could not process the number, so he dismissed it. That was the moment I stopped sharing. Silence became my shield. Tessa, on the other hand, is loud. Tessa owns Velvet Rowan Studio. It is a boutique event planning and fashion consulting firm in downtown Greenville. The name is plastered on the window in gold leaf script. Inside there are velvet sofas, neon signs that say things like good vibes only, and a refrigerator stocked with organic sparkling water. It is beautiful, it is trendy, and it is a financial black hole. I know this because I know business. I know that you cannot pay rent on a prime downtown location by selling 3 consultations a month. I know that Tessa spends more on fresh flowers for the reception desk than she brings in from actual clients. But my parents love Velvet Rowan Studio. They love telling their friends that their daughter is an entrepreneur in the fashion industry. It sounds elegant, fits the picture, so they fund it. They call it investing. But I know what it is. It is a subsidy. They pay her rent. They pay for her car lease, a white Range Rover that she claims is a business expense. They slip her checks to cover payroll when her cash flow dries up, which happens every single month. They are terrified that she will fail. If Tessa fails, the golden child narrative collapses. If Tessa fails, they have to look at me, the one they ignored, and realize that I was the one they should have been betting on all along. They would burn their own retirement savings to the ground before they let that happen. This brings me back to the envelope. When Tessa walked into my room and took that money, she did not see it as stealing. In her mind, the world owes her. She has been told her entire life that she is special, that she deserves the best, that things should just work out for her. When things do not work out, she panics. She looks for a lifeline. And there was her big sister, the one who has no husband, no kids, no real expenses. In Tessa's twisted logic, taking $5,000 from me was almost a moral act. I was hoarding it. I was not using it to build a brand or maintain an image. I was just letting it sit there. She probably told herself she would pay it back. That is the lie all addicts tell themselves. And Tessa is addicted to the lifestyle my parents hooked her on. She probably thought Brooke will not even miss it. And even if she does, she won't do anything, she never does. She was relying on the old script. The script where I take the high road. The script where I absorb the blow to keep the peace. The script where I let them treat me like a doormat because I'm desperate for the scraps of affection they throw my way. But she missed the signs. She missed the fact that I did not flinch when Dad insulted me at dinner. She missed the fact that my clothes were high quality, even if they lacked logos. She missed the fact that I was not looking for their approval anymore. I watched her that morning in the kitchen, her hands shaking around her tea mug, and I felt a profound sense of detachment. I did not hate her. You cannot hate a creature that has been trained to be helpless. Tessa was a product of my parents' vanity just as much as I was a product of their neglect. However, understanding the monster does not mean you have to let it eat you. I walked back to the guest room after breakfast and sat on the edge of the unmade bed. I opened my laptop. It was a secure work computer, fingerprint encrypted. I logged into my personal dashboard. I saw the notification I had been waiting for. You see, I did not just leave cash in that envelope. I am a data architect. I deal in tracking and verification. I do not leave things to chance. The $5,000 was real. But the serial numbers on the bills were not random. I had withdrawn the cash from a specific bank branch where the teller, a woman named Sarah, who I had helped with a software issue years ago, had logged the sequence for me as a favor. It was a soft trace, useful only if the police were involved. But I knew I would not need the police for the cash. The cash was the cheese in the mousetrap. The real mechanism of the trap was something else entirely. Something much more dangerous than paper money. I thought about the last 10 years of holidays. The way my mother would seat me at the end of the table near the kitchen door so I could help clear plates. The way my father would introduce Tessa to his business partners but forget to introduce me. The way they asked me to house sit when they went to Europe, not because they wanted me to enjoy the house, but because they didn't trust the neighbors. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the extra child. The backup plan that didn't quite work out. I looked at the screen of my laptop. I pulled up the dossier I had started compiling 6 months ago. It started as a curiosity. I had run a standard background check on myself as part of a security clearance audit for a new Northline contract. The results had been interesting. There were inquiries on my credit report that I had not initiated. There were soft pulls from banks I did not bank with at the time. I brushed it off as a glitch. But then I dug deeper. I saw the pattern. The inquiries always coincided with the dates when Velvet Rowan Studio was expanding or renovating. I had known then that something was wrong, but I needed proof. I needed them to get comfortable. I needed them to think I was so oblivious, so checked out that I would leave $5,000 sitting on a table in an unlocked room. I closed the laptop and stood up. I walked over to the mirror hanging on the back of the door. The glass was old and slightly warped, giving my reflection a wavy quality. I looked at my own eyes. They were the same shape as my mother's, but they held none of her frantic need to please. They were cold. They were clear. Tessa had taken the envelope. That meant she had taken the bait. And now the real work would begin. I was not going to scream. I was not going to cry. I was simply going to allow the laws of physics to take over. Action and reaction, cause and effect. My family had spent 30 years building a house of cards. They had spent 30 years convincing the world that the cards were made of steel. I adjusted my collar in the mirror. It was time to turn on the fan. The loss of $5,000 was an annoyance in the grand calculus of my life. It was a rounding error. A tax I paid for the misfortune of sharing DNA with thieves. But when I returned to the guest room after that surreal conversation in the kitchen, I realized the theft was not just about quick cash. It was about access. I knelt by my suitcase. It was still sitting on the luggage rack where I had left it, but the angle was wrong. I have a habit bordering on a pathology of aligning my belongings with the geometric patterns of the floor. When I left the room, the wheels of the suitcase had been parallel to the dark grain of the hardwood. Now the left wheel was skewed inward by perhaps half an inch. Someone had not just reached in, they had rummaged. I ran my hand along the inner lining of the front pocket where the envelope had been. My fingers brushed against the nylon, searching for the small, hard lump that should have been there. It was gone. My breath hitched in my throat, a sharp intake of cold air. Inside that envelope, tucked behind the stack of $100 bills, I had placed a USB drive. It was a small slate gray metallic stick no larger than a thumbnail. To the untrained eye, it looked like a generic storage device one might pick up at an office supply store. To me, it was a distinct security risk. The drive contained encrypted backups of my personal tax returns from the last 3 years and a digital copy of my birth certificate and social security card. I had brought it because I was in the process of closing on a vacation property in Aspen, and my lawyer needed the documents readily available. I had put it in the envelope with the cash because I assumed foolishly that keeping my valuables together was safer than scattering them. Tessa had not just taken the money, she had taken my identity. I stood up slowly, the joints of my knees popping in the silence. The room suddenly felt very small. I walked over to the door and examined the latch. The brass was old, tarnished by decades of humidity. There were fresh scratches on the strike plate, tiny, bright grooves where metal had scraped against metal. She had used a credit card or a thin knife to shim the lock. It was a crude method, sloppy and desperate. I looked at the floor near the threshold. The dust bunnies under the dresser had been disturbed. A long smear in the dust indicated where a slipper or a sock had dragged. I sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing at the speed of a microprocessor. Why take the USB? Did she think it was valuable? Or did she just grab the entire envelope in a panic, shoving the whole package into her pocket without checking the contents? My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Jade. Jade is my cousin, the daughter of my mother's sister. She is the black sheep of the extended family because she works as a bartender and refuses to dye her graying hair. She is also the only person in this zip code who does not lie to me. Watch your back. The text read, Tessa is manic. I heard her on the phone in the garage. She is crying about a deadline. I think she owes money to the wrong kind of people. I stared at the screen. The wrong kind of people. That explained the desperation. It explained the sloppy break-in, but it did not explain the depth of the violation. I opened my banking app. Then I switched to my credit monitoring service. I pay a premium for real-time alerts, a service usually reserved for corporations, but essential for someone in my position. The dashboard loaded. A spinning circle of blue light. One new alert. I tapped the notification. My stomach dropped as if the floor had vanished beneath me. Inquiry type. Guarantor verification. Institution Palmetto Regional Lending. Status pending review. Amount $75,000. I sat there frozen. The air in the room seemed to vanish. A guarantor. Someone was trying to take out a loan for $75,000. And they had listed me as the cosigner, not just a reference, a guarantor. That meant if the borrower defaulted, I was legally liable for the entire debt. I had signed nothing. I had spoken to no one at Palmetto Regional Lending. I tapped for more details. The application had been submitted 48 hours ago. It was pending final signature verification. My mind clicked into place, connecting the dots with terrifying clarity. The missing USB drive, the digital copies of my ID, the tax returns showing a history of income, albeit the modest freelance income one had faked for the family, which was still better than Tessa's insolvency. Tessa was not just stealing cash to pay off a debt. She was using my identity to refinance her life. She was building a life raft out of my credit score. I closed my eyes for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I allowed myself to feel the fury. It was a hot white burn that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. It was the rage of every birthday she had ruined, every achievement she had overshadowed, every time my parents had asked me to be the bigger person. Then I opened my eyes and I pushed the rage down into a cold, dark box. Rage is messy. Rage makes you make mistakes. I needed to be surgical. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I checked my face. I looked calm. I looked like a woman who was enjoying a slow holiday morning. I smoothed my sweater, ran a hand through my hair, and opened the door. I walked back out to the kitchen. The scene had shifted slightly since breakfast. My father was now on the patio ostensibly supervising the grill for lunch, though it was barely 10 o'clock. My mother was at the kitchen island, furiously polishing silver that was already clean. Tessa was sitting at the breakfast nook, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. When I entered, the conversation stopped abruptly. It was that distinct guilty silence that follows the mention of a name. "More coffee?" my mother asked. Her voice too high, too bright. "Please," I said. I walked over and poured a cup. My hand was steady as I lifted the carafe. I could feel Tessa's eyes boring into the side of my head. I turned and leaned against the counter, blowing softly on the hot liquid. "So," I said, keeping my tone light, "what is the plan for today? Are we going into town?" "I have to work," Tessa said quickly. She did not look up from her phone. Her thumbs were flying across the screen. "Velvet Rowan has a big client coming in a wedding, very high profile." "That is wonderful," I said. "You must be busy." Insanely, she muttered. I watched her hands. They were trembling. A fine, subtle tremor that made the phone shake slightly in her grip. She looked pale, her skin possessing a clammy sheen despite the perfectly applied foundation. My mother cleared her throat. She put down the polishing cloth and looked at me with a pained expression. "Brooke, your father and I were talking. We were wondering if you have thought about your long-term plans, with the economy being what it is." "My plans are fine, Mom." I said. "Well, we just worry," she continued. "We know freelancing can be inconsistent and sometimes, people need a bridge, a little help to get to the next step." I sipped my coffee. "Are you offering me money?" "No," she said, startled. "No, we were just discussing how expensive things are." Tessa was telling us about the overhead at the studio. "It is shocking, really, the cost of doing business. Takes money to make money," Tessa said. Reciting a cliché she had likely read on Instagram, she finally looked up at me. Her eyes were glassy. "But you wouldn't understand that, Brooke. You do not have overhead. You just have whatever it is you do." "I have expenses," I said. "Rent, insurance, taxes." At the word taxes, Tessa flinched. It was microscopic, a tiny tightening of the jaw. But I saw it. She knew what was on that USB drive. She had likely already opened the files. "Speaking of expenses," my father's voice boomed as he slid the patio door open. He stepped into the kitchen, bringing a gust of cold air with him. "Brooke, do you have any savings?" "Real savings, not just checking account money." I looked at him. He was trying to sound paternal, but his eyes were shifting away from mine. He was fishing. He wanted to know if I was solvent enough to be worth fleecing. Or perhaps he already knew what Tessa was doing and was trying to justify it to himself. "She has savings." He might be telling himself. "She can absorb the hit." "I have a rainy day fund," I said vaguely. "How much of a rainy day?" he pressed. 3 months? 6 months? "Enough," I said. "You are always so secretive." Tessa snapped. The stress was fraying her nerves, making her aggressive. Why can't you just give a straight answer? Enough could mean $500 or $5,000. I turned my head slowly to look at her. I held her gaze until she blinked. It is interesting you chose those numbers, I said softly. Tessa froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked down at her coffee mug. I was just picking random numbers. Do not be weird. I am not being weird, I said. I am just impressed. You seem to know a lot about the value of things lately. What is that supposed to mean? She demanded. Nothing, I said. Just that you are running a business. You must be good with numbers. My mother laughed nervously. Oh, Tessa is a genius with the budget. You should see the spreadsheet she makes. I almost laughed out loud. I had seen Tessa's spreadsheets years ago. They were colored blocks of fantasy where income was projected based on manifesting and expenses were categorized as investments in self. By the way, I said, setting my mug down on the counter with a deliberate click. I was looking for that envelope again, the one I thought I misplaced. I checked the drawers in the guest room. Nothing. Tessa's head snapped up. I thought you said you didn't care. I don't, I said. But it is bothering me. I usually have such a good memory for where I put things. It is almost like it walked away. Well, it didn't walk. My father grunted. You probably dropped it somewhere. You were always losing your retainer when you were a kid. Maybe, I said. But the funny thing is, I also can't find my flash drive. It was in the same spot. The room went dead silent. Tessa's face drained of color. She knew about the cash. She had counted the cash. But the flash drive, the USB that was the smoking gun. If she admitted to knowing anything about it, she admitted to the theft. But if she stayed silent, she had to wonder if I knew what was on it. She had to wonder if I knew she had used it. A flash drive, my mother asked. Was it important? Just some photos, I lied. And some old documents. Nothing interesting unless you are interested in boring tax forms. Tessa choked on her tea. She started coughing, a harsh hacking sound that forced her to bend over the table. My mother rushed to pat her back. Oh, sweetie, are you okay? Drink some water. Tessa waved her hand, gasping for air. Her eyes were watering, but through the tears, she looked at me with sheer terror. She had seen the tax forms. She had used the information on them. And now she knew that I knew they were missing. When she finally caught her breath, she wiped her mouth with a napkin. She looked exhausted, trapped, and incredibly small. You are so careless, Brooke. She rasped, her voice trembling. You really are. You hide your money so well. You trick yourself, and now you are losing electronics. You should really get a safe. I smiled. There it was. You are right, I said. I hide money so well. It is a wonder anyone could ever find it. Tessa went still. She realized what she had said. She realized that by commenting on how I hid money, she had implied she knew the method of the hiding. She had implied she had looked. My father, oblivious as ever to the nuances of the conversation, grunted. Well, check your car. Probably fell under the seat. I will do that, I said. I looked at Tessa one last time. I will check everywhere because if that flash drive fell into the wrong hands. Swell. Identity theft is a felony. It carries a mandatory prison sentence in some cases. I would hate for anyone to get in trouble just because I was careless. Tessa pushed her chair back. The legs screeched against the tile floor. I have to go, she said. I am late for the studio. She practically ran out of the room. I heard the front door slam a few seconds later, followed by the roar of her Range Rover engine. My mother sighed. She works so hard. You should try to be more supportive, Brooke. She's under a lot of pressure. I know, Mom. I said. I am going to be very supportive. You have no idea. I picked up my coffee cup and finished the last drop. It was bitter, but I barely tasted it. My mind was already 3 steps ahead. Tessa had the documents. She had submitted the application. The credit inquiry was pending. She thought she had gotten away with the perfect crime because she thought I was helpless. She thought I was the sister who cried in her room. She did not know that she had just handed me the weapon I had been waiting 30 years to use. I took out my phone and sent a message to my lawyer in Atlanta. Miles, clear your schedule. We have a situation and check the jurisdiction for fraud in South Carolina. I think we are going to need a local investigator. I looked out the window at the gray winter sky. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, but it was weak. The game had changed. It was no longer about a few thousand in a white envelope. It was about to be a lesson in consequences, and I was going to be the teacher. The silence in my Atlanta apartment was heavy, but it was a clean silence. It did not smell of potpourri or passive-aggressive comments. It smelled of polished concrete, filtered air, and the expensive espresso machine on my counter. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights bleeding into the twilight. I had left Greenville 3 hours ago, claiming an urgent work crisis. My parents had been disappointed, but Tessa had looked relieved. She thought she had survived the weekend. She thought the danger had passed because I had driven away. She was wrong. I had not driven away from the problem. I had driven toward the solution. I walked to my desk, a slab of reclaimed wood that cost more than my father's entire living room set, and woke up my monitors. The glow of the screens illuminated the room in a cool blue light. I had 3 emails flagged in my personal secure folder. The subject line of the first one made the muscles in my neck tighten. Urgent verification required. Loan guarantor status. Velvet Rowan Studio. I sat down. I did not click it immediately. I took a breath, holding it for 4 seconds, then releasing it for 4. It is a technique I use before board meetings when I have to fire someone. Keeps the heart rate manageable. I clicked the email. It was from a secondary lender, a company that specialized in high-risk small business loans, the kind of place you went to when the major banks had already laughed you out of the lobby. The body of the email was polite but threatening. It stated that the primary borrower, Tessa Martin, doing business as Velvet Rowan Studio, had missed a scheduled verification step for a loan of $75,000. As the listed guarantor, they were contacting me to confirm that I was aware of the delinquency and to verify my assets, $75,000. I stared at the number. It was enough to ruin a person. If I were the struggling freelancer my family thought I was, this debt would be a death sentence. It would garnish my wages for a decade. It would destroy my credit score, making it impossible to rent an apartment or buy a car. It was a financial shackle, but it was the attachment that made my blood run cold. I opened the PDF file attached to the email. It was a scanned copy of the loan agreement. I scrolled past the boilerplate legal text, past the interest rates that bordered on predatory, and down to the signature page. There on the line marked Gerer was my name, Brooke Martin. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. I studied the ink to a stranger. It looked authentic. The slant was right. The way the B looped was familiar, but I knew my hand. I knew the rhythm of my own wrist. When I sign my name, I press hard on the cross of the T. A sharp, decisive strike. This signature was soft. It hesitated at the top of the K. It was a drawing of a signature, not a signature itself. It lacked the breath of the writer. It was a forgery, and it was not even a masterpiece. I scrolled down to the next page. This was the identity verification section. My heart stopped for a beat. There, staring back at me from the screen, was a copy of my driver's license. But it was not my current license. It was the one I had issued when I was 25. The one with the terrible photo where I had blinked. I had lost that card years ago. Or at least I thought I had lost it. I remembered leaving it on the dresser in my old bedroom when I came home for Christmas that year. And when I went to look for it, it was gone. My mother had said I probably dropped it at the gas station. I realized now that it had never left the house. Someone had kept it. Someone had tucked it away in a file, waiting for a rainy day. And now it was raining. The betrayal hit me then, not as a wave of sadness, but as a physical blow to the stomach. This was not just Tessa being desperate. This was premeditated to use that specific ID. She had to have known where it was. She had to have dug it out. She had to have planned this fraud weeks, maybe months in advance. The theft of the cash in the USB drive this weekend was just the final piece of the puzzle. She needed my current financial data to back up the old ID. I did not cry. I did not throw the expensive glass vase on my desk against the wall. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I had memorized long ago. It rang once. Miles Carter, a voice answered. Crisp, deep, and devoid of nonsense. It is Brooke, I said. Brooke, Miles said, his tone shifting instantly from professional to personal warmth. I thought you were in South Carolina playing the beautiful daughter. Did you escape early? I am back in Atlanta, I said. I need you to open a secure file. I am sending you a document right now. I hit send on the email, forwarding the loan agreement to his encrypted firm address. Sent, I said. Tell me when you have it. I heard the click of a mouse on his end. A moment of silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. I am looking at it, Miles said. Velvet Rowan Studio, $75,000, high-interest commercial loan. You are listed as the guarantor. Brooke, why would you sign this? You know these terms are garbage. You could lend her this money from your petty cash account without the interest. Look at the signature. Miles, I said. Silence stretched over the line. I could hear him zooming in just as I had. The pressure is inconsistent, he said finally. The M is too round. This is not you. No, I said it is not. And the ID, he continued, his voice hardening. This license expired 8 years ago. The loan officer should have caught that unless they were negligent or unless someone doctored the expiration date on the scan. It looks doctored, I said. The date looks pixelated compared to the rest of the text. Okay. Miles said the warmth was gone from his voice, replaced by the cold steel of the attorney. I paid a retainer of $5,000 a month to keep on standby. Let us be clear about what we are looking at. This is not a family dispute. This is wire fraud. This is identity theft. This is grand larceny given the amount. If this goes through and she defaults, which looking at her financials, she absolutely will. They will come after you. They will freeze your assets. They could put a lien on your apartment. It could trigger an audit for Northline Systems if you are listed as a liable party in a defaulted commercial loan. I know. I said we have two options. Miles said, Option A is the soft approach. We contact the lender, claim it as a misunderstanding, and try to get your name removed, but that requires Tessa to cooperate, and it requires the lender to be forgiving. Option B is the hard approach. We file a police report for identity theft. We send a fraud affidavit to the lender. We nuke the loan from orbit, but that means Tessa goes to jail. Brooke, federal jail. Wire fraud is no joke. I swiveled my chair to look out the window again. The city below was a grid of moving lights. People rushing home to their families, to their dinners, to their lives. I wondered how many of them were sleeping in the same house as a thief. I do not want to send her to jail yet, I said. But I do not want to pay her debt. Then we need leverage, Miles said. We need proof that she did this maliciously right now. She could claim you gave her verbal permission and she just signed for you because you were busy. It is weak. But families get away with it all the time in civil court. It becomes he said, she said, we need something that proves intent. I closed my eyes. I thought about the white envelope on the side table in the guest room. I thought about the USB drive. She stole $5,000 from my room on Saturday night. I said, "What?" Miles asked. "Cash?" I said. "I left an envelope in the guest room. $5,000 in $100 bills. She took it while I was sleeping. Did you confront her?" "No." "Did you report it?" "No." "Brooke." Miles sighed. "If you didn't report it, it didn't happen. It is your word against hers." There was something else in the envelope. I said a USB drive encrypted, but the password was written on a slip of paper inside the case. I made it easy for her. Miles was silent for a long time. He was a brilliant lawyer because he understood human nature as well as he understood the law. He was processing what I had just told him. He was realizing that I had not been a passive victim in Greenville. "Brooke," he said slowly, "did you put that envelope there on purpose?" "I put it on the table," I said. "I made sure the corner was sticking out. I made sure she saw me withdraw cash earlier in the week." "You baited her," Miles stated. "It was not a question. I needed to know," I said. My voice did not shake. I needed to know if she was just incompetent or if she was a predator. I needed to know if my sister was the kind of person who would look me in the eye at breakfast after robbing me blind. And Miles asked, "And now I know," I said. She looked me in the eye and asked me if I had lost anything. She smiled. Miles. She smiled while she had my money in her pocket and my identity in her application. "So, the theft of the cash establishes a pattern," Miles said, his brain already building the case. "It proves she had access to your personal effects. If we can prove she has the USB drive, we link her directly to the source of the stolen data. That destroys any defense of verbal permission she might try to concoct." "Exactly." And I said, "I have the serial numbers of the bills and the USB drive. It has a tracker." "A what?" "Passive RFID chip." I said, "It is not a GPS. It is short range, but it registers when it passes through certain toll readers or high scanners, or if I get close enough with a reader." "Jesus, Brooke," Miles muttered. "You really are your own security team." "I run a logistics company." I said, "I track shipping containers across the ocean. Tracking a flash drive is child's play." "Okay." Miles said, "This changes things. We are not defenseless. We are loaded for bear. What do you want to do? Do you want me to call the police in Greenville?" "No," I said. "Not yet. If we call the police, my parents will circle the wagons. They will lie. They will say I gave her the money. They will say I'm crazy. They will gaslight the entire investigation until it goes away. Then what? I want to corner her." I said, "I want her to admit it. I want her to sign a confession that indemnifies me completely. I want to cut the strings. Miles, all of them. I want to make sure that, after this, she can never ever use my name again. That is a high bar." Miles warned to get a confession. You have to put pressure on her. You have to scare her more than she is scared of the debt. She is scared of being exposed. I said she is scared of everyone knowing that the golden child is a fraud. That is her weakness. My parents' pride is her shield, but it is also her cage. "Okay," Miles said, "I will draft a cease and desist to the lender to buy us time. I will flag the application as under review for potential errors rather than fraud so they do not call the cops immediately. That gives us about 48 hours before the loan defaults or gets rejected." 48 hours, I repeated. "I will also hire a private investigator in Greenville," Miles added. "We need to know where she put that money and those documents. If she destroys them, we lose our physical evidence." "She won't destroy them." I said she needs the documents for the loan and she needs the money to pay the interest. "You sound very sure." "I know her." I said she is greedy, Miles. "Greedy people do not throw things away." "All right," Miles said, "I am on it." I will have the papers ready by tomorrow morning. Brooke. Yes. Be careful, he said. When you back an animal into a corner, they bite. And your family, they have been biting you for a long time. I know, I said. But this time I have teeth too. I hung up the phone. The apartment was dark now, save for the blue glow of the monitors. I looked at the forged signature one last time. It was a caricature of me. It was the version of me they wanted: compliant, silent, useful. I selected the file and hit save. I was done being useful. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of sparkling water. The bubbles hissed in the glass. I took a sip. The cold liquid sharp against my throat. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The anxiety was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the plan. I picked up my phone again and opened the tracking app one had built myself. I entered the unique ID for the tag hidden inside the USB casing. The map loaded. A small red dot pulsed on the screen. It was in Greenville. I zoomed in. It was not at my parents' house. It was not at Velvet Rowan Studio. It was at a location on the outskirts of town near the industrial park. I smiled. I knew exactly where she was keeping my life, and soon I would go and take it back. The red dot on my laptop screen had stopped moving. It was pulsing steadily at a location 3 miles west of my parents' house in an industrial strip that time and the economic boom of the 90s had forgotten. I did not need to guess what the building was. I pulled up the satellite view. The long gray rectangular roofs were unmistakable. It was a self-S storage facility. Specifically, it was Secure Keep Mini Storage. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking softly in the quiet of my Atlanta apartment. A smile touched my lips, but it was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a grandmaster who watches an opponent move their queen into a line of fire, thinking they are being aggressive when they are actually committing suicide. Tessa thought she had stolen $5,000 and a flash drive. She thought she had walked away with a secret. What she did not know was that she was carrying a beacon. The envelope I had left in the guest room was not just paper. It was a piece of engineering. The money inside was real. 50 bills of $100 each. But before I had placed them in the envelope, I had scanned every single bill. I had a digital log of every serial number. I had the withdrawal receipt from my bank timestamped 48 hours prior to the theft. If a single one of those bills was used at a bank, a car dealership, or deposited into a business account, I could trace it back to my withdrawal. But the tracking was the immediate weapon. I had not placed a camera in the guest room. I knew the laws in South Carolina. Recording someone in a place where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy, even in your own parents' home, creates a legal gray area that a defense attorney could exploit. I did not want gray areas. I wanted black and white. I wanted admissible evidence. So, I tracked my own property. The device was a wafer-thin passive GPS tracker slipped between the lining of the envelope and the cardstock I had used to stiffen it. It was usually used for tracking high-value cargo shipments. Battery-powered with a lifespan of 6 months. It was silent. It was invisible. And it was currently broadcasting from inside unit number 412 at Secure Keep Mini Storage. I picked up my phone. Miles answered on the first ring. "We have a location," I said. "Where is she?" Miles asked. I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. It was 8 o'clock at night, but I knew he was still at his desk. "She is not there," I said. "But the package is at a storage facility off Highway 25. "Do we know who owns the unit?" Miles asked. "I am checking the property records now." I lied. I was actually hacking into the facility's tenant portal using a brute force algorithm I had written in college. It took the program 12 seconds to crack the manager's default password. "Got it. The unit is registered to Velvet Rowan Studio." "Of course it is." Miles sighed. "She is hoarding." It gets better, I said, scrolling through the payment history. She is 6 months behind on the unit rental. They were about to auction it off next week. She just made a cash payment this morning. $500 in person. Let me guess, Miles said she paid with 5 $100 bills. I would bet my entire company on it, I said. And since the facility manager likely deposited that cash into the night drop, those bills are already in the banking system, the serial number flags will pop up by tomorrow. Brooke, this is textbook, Miles said. His voice held a note of professional admiration. You let her steal the money so she would use it to pay off the debt she was hiding. You forced her to create a paper trail using stolen assets. I did not force her to do anything, I said coldly. I just gave her the opportunity to show me who she is. I sent the PI over there an hour ago. Miles said he just called me back. He did a little dumpster diving and chatted up the night guard. Apparently, Tessa has been moving boxes in and out of there for weeks. The guard thinks she is running an eBay business, but the PI saw the labels on some of the boxes through the ventilation gap. It is financial records, old tax returns, loan applications. She is not just hiding my money, Miles. She is hiding the evidence of her insolvency. We can get a subpoena for the unit contents. Miles said once we file the fraud claim, that unit becomes evidence. Not yet, I said. If we move now, she claims it was a mistake. She claims she found the money and was keeping it safe in the unit. We need her to spend more of it. We need her to bleed that envelope dry. You are ruthless, Miles said. I am efficient, I replied. Now tell me about the lender. You said you got a response on the signature verification. The line went quiet for a moment. The rustling of papers stopped. Yeah, Miles said. His tone had shifted. It was heavier now. I spoke to the compliance officer at Palmetto Regional. I pushed them on the Know Your Customer protocols. I asked them how they verified the guarantor's identity if the signature was clearly shaky. They said the guarantor came in person. Miles said I froze. What? They said Brooke Martin came into the branch on Friday afternoon. Miles continued. She presented a valid driver's license. She knew her social security number. She knew her mother's maiden name. She verified her current address in Atlanta. She sat across from the loan officer, signed the papers, and thanked him for his help. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles turned white. I was in Atlanta on Friday afternoon, I said. I have badge swipes at my office to prove it. I was in a meeting with my CTO from 2 o'clock until 6. I know that, Miles said, and the lender will know that soon enough. But Brooke, the loan officer, said something else. He said she looked exactly like the ID photo. He said she was charming. He said she talked about how much she believed in her sister's business. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was not fear, it was disgust. She dressed up as me, I whispered. It looks that way, Miles said. Tessa put on a wig. Maybe use some contouring makeup. You two have the same bone structure. If she used your old ID, the one where you were younger, she could pass for you, especially to a loan officer who just wants to close the deal and go home. She didn't just dress up, I said, my voice shaking with a sudden violent realization. She practiced. You do not just walk into a bank and impersonate someone on a whim. You have to know the mannerisms. You have to know the answers to the security questions before they are asked. She rehearsed this. Identity theft is one thing, Miles said. Impersonation in a physical bank branch, that is 20 years. Brooke, if we pin this on her, she is done. Her life is over. She ended her life the moment she signed my name, I said. But my mind was racing beyond Tessa. Tessa was an idiot. She was greedy and vain, but she was not a mastermind to pull off an impersonation this clean. She needed confidence. She needed to know that the real Brooke would not walk through the door at that exact moment. She needed to know that the real Brooke was safely tucked away in Atlanta, or better yet, kept distracted. I thought about the phone call I had received from my mother on Friday afternoon. She had called me at 3 o'clock, right in the middle of my meeting. She had kept me on the phone for 20 minutes, rambling about a recipe for pecan pie she wanted to try. It was unusual. My mother never called me during work hours. Miles, I said, check the timestamp on the loan signing. I have it right here, Miles said. Signed at 3:15 in the afternoon. I closed my eyes. My mother called me at 3, I said. She kept me on the line until 3:20. You think she was stalling you? Miles asked. You think she was the lookout? I think she was making sure I was in Atlanta, I said. I think she was verifying my location so Tessa could walk into that bank without fear of me showing up or calling. Jesus. Miles breathed. The whole family. They protect the asset. I said, Tessa is the asset. I am the resource. You exploit the resource to feed the asset. I opened my eyes. The map on my screen was still glowing. The red dot at the storage unit was steady. They think they won, I said. They think the loan is approved. They think the money is safe. They think I am the stupid silent sister who will just work harder to pay off whatever mess they make. So what is the move? Miles asked. We have the location. We have the fraud. We have the impersonation. We wait, I said. We wait for the default notice to hit. We wait for the panic to set in and then we invite them to dinner. You want to face them. I do not want to just face them. Miles, I said, I want to dismantle them. I want to sit at a table and watch them lie to my face, knowing that I have the photos, the timestamps, and the tracking data in my briefcase. I want to see the moment they realize that the game is not played by their rules anymore. Okay, Miles said, I will prepare the paperwork. We will be ready to drop the hammer whenever you say the word. Get the PI to watch the storage unit, I said. If she moves anything, I want to know. If she burns anything, I want pictures of the smoke. Understood, Miles said. And Brooke, yeah, when you bring this down, he said, make sure you are standing far enough away. The debris field is going to be large. I am not standing away, I said. I am the demolition expert. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. I looked at my own face, the face that Tessa had stolen, the face she had worn like a costume to rob me. She had studied me. She had practiced my signature. She had memorized my history, but she had missed the most important part of who I was. She thought I was weak because I was quiet. She thought I was generous because I was absent. She did not know that in the world of logistics, silence is not weakness. Silence is the sound of a system working perfectly. And my system was about to process a rejection that would shatter her world. I went back to my computer and opened a new window. I navigated to the website of the storage facility. I did not log in as the manager this time. I logged in as a potential customer. I reserved the unit directly across the hall from number 412. If Tessa was going to visit her secrets, I wanted to be there to open the door for her. The trap was set. The cheese was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The vibration of my phone on the mahogany desk was not a noise. It was a physical intrusion. In the pristine silence of my office, where the only sound was the hum of the climate control system keeping the server room at a perfect 68 degrees, the buzzing felt like a warning shot. I looked at the screen. It was Jade. Jade did not text for pleasantries. She did not send memes or holiday greetings. If Jade was typing, the roof was on fire. They are spinning the narrative. The message read, Aunt Arlene is on the phone with Cousin Beth. She is telling everyone that you came home to ask for a loan. She is saying you are in debt and that you caused a scene about money because you are jealous of Tessa's success. They are vaccinating the family against the truth. Brooke, if you speak up now, you will just look like the desperate, bitter sister. I set the phone down. I stared at the wood grain of my desk. It was a brilliant tactical maneuver. I had to give them credit. My parents understood the court of public opinion far better than they understood the laws of finance. By planting the seed that I was the one with money problems, they discredited any future accusations I might make. If I claimed Tessa stole from me, the family would shake their heads and say, "Poor Brooke, she is projecting. She is so broke she has to invent stories." They were not just protecting Tessa. They were burying me. I stood up and walked to the kitchenette to pour a glass of water. My hand was steady. My heart rate was 60 beats per minute. I was not angry in the hot, chaotic way I used to be when I was 20. This was a cold, calcified realization. My family was not a family. It was a cartel. And I was the liability they were preparing to liquidate. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. The number was saved in my contacts, though I had never dialed it. It belonged to Gavin, Tessa's boyfriend, the man who looked good in a suit, but always seemed to be looking for the nearest exit in any room. I swiped to answer. "Hello, Gavin." "Brooke." His voice was a whisper. There was a hollow echo behind him, like he was standing in a stairwell or a bathroom. "Can you talk? Is this a safe line?" "I am in my own office, Gavin," I said. "I do not have lines that aren't safe." "Why are you whispering?" "I am at the studio," he said. "Tessa is in the back yelling at a florist." "Listen, I do not know if I should be doing this. I really don't. But something is wrong." "Define wrong." I said the money, he said. "The studio, it is all smoke and mirrors." "Brooke, you know that, right? But it has gotten worse. We are 3 months behind on the lease. The landlord came by yesterday with an eviction notice. He said if we do not pay by Friday, he is changing the locks." And I waited. I needed him to say it. "And Tessa, she is acting crazy," Gavin continued. His voice cracked. "She came in this morning with cash, a stack of $100 bills. She said it was an angel investment. She paid the florist. She paid the electric bill, but she was shaking. Brooke, she looked like she was going to throw up." "Why are you telling me this, Gavin?" "Because she keeps talking about you," he said. "She keeps saying Brooke won't do anything. Brooke never does anything. She said it like a mantra. She is rich. She won't miss it. She does not have the guts to make a scene." I felt a muscle in my jaw tighten. She does not have the guts. That was their fundamental miscalculation. They mistook dignity for cowardice. They thought my silence over the years was submission. They did not understand that I was simply waiting until the cost of war was worth the victory. "Gavin," I said softly, "did she tell you where she got the money?" "No," he said, "but she said there is more coming. She said she has a loan approved, $75,000. She said the guarantor paperwork went through on Friday." "I see," I said. "And did she mention who the guarantor was?" "She said it was a silent partner," Gavin said. "But I saw the file, Brooke. It was on her desk before she swept it into her bag. I saw the name on the folder tab. It said B. Martin Financials." I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed by a third party was different than seeing it on a screen. It made it physical. It made it real. "Gavin," I said, "I need you to think very carefully. Does Tessa keep any other files with my name on them? Old tax returns, identification cards?" "I don't know," he stammered. "Maybe she has boxes of stuff. She calls it her archive." "Where is the archive?" "It used to be here," he said. "But she moved it about 2 weeks ago. She said the studio was too cluttered. She rented a storage unit." "Do you know which one?" I asked, though I already knew. I needed him to be the witness. I needed him to be the one who compromised her. "Yeah," he said. "Secure, keep out on the highway. She gave me the key once to drop off some props, but she took it back immediately. She is weird about that place. She goes there at night. Thank you, Gavin. I said, wait, Brooke, he said, panic rising in his voice. What are you going to do if the studio goes under? I lose my job. I am on the payroll. Sort of. If this loan falls through, if the loan goes through, Gavin, you are an accessory to federal wire fraud. I said, the loan is fraudulent. The guarantor is fake, and if you cash a paycheck from those funds, you are laundering stolen money. The silence on the other end was absolute. I could hear his breathing hitch. I didn't know, he whispered. You know now, I said, if I were you, I would leave the building and I would lose that key if you ever get it again. I hung up. I stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline settle. Gavin was a weak link. He would fold the moment pressure was applied. He had just given me the verbal confirmation that linked the physical location of the stolen documents to Tessa's possession. Then my phone rang again. It was my father. I stared at the screen. Grant Martin, the man who had taught me that love was conditional and that my condition was never quite good enough. I answered, "Hello, Dad." Brooke, his voice boomed, but it lacked its usual theatrical joviality. It was sharp, edged with irritation. "Your mother tells me you left without saying goodbye. Just ran off to Atlanta. That was rude, Brooke. We had guests." "I had work," I said. "Work," he scoffed. "Always work. You know, family is work, too. You can't just clock out of being a daughter. Is there a reason you're calling, Dad?" I asked. "Or are we just reviewing my etiquette?" "I am calling because your sister is upset," he said. "She says you were acting strange all weekend, making little comments, making her nervous. She has a big deal closing. Brooke, she does not need your negative energy hovering over her." "My negative energy," I repeated. "Is that what we are calling it? You know what I mean?" He snapped. "You have always been jealous of her. Ever since you were little, you can't stand that she lights up a room. You sit in the corner and judge. We all see it." "I am not jealous," I said. "I am observant." "Stop it," he ordered. "Just stop. Listen to me. Tessa needs this loan. It is a bridge. Just a temporary thing to get the studio to the next level. She is going to pay it back. She always does." I froze. He knew about the loan. He wasn't just calling to scold me for being rude. He was calling to manage the asset. He knew there was a loan. And judging by his defensive tone, he knew exactly how that loan had been secured. "Dad," I said slowly, "how do you know about the loan?" "She told me," he said. "She tells me everything, unlike you." "Did she tell you who co-signed for it?" I asked. "What does that matter?" He deflected. "She found a backer. Someone who believes in her. Someone who isn't afraid to help family." "Family?" I said. "So a family member signed for it." "I didn't say that," he said quickly. Too quickly. "I said someone who acts like family, someone generous. You know, you could learn a thing or two from that. You are sitting there in Atlanta on a pile of money probably, and your sister is scraping by. Would it kill you to help her? Would it kill you to just let things slide for once?" "Let what slide?" I pressed. "Theft, fraud. Don't use those words," he shouted. The veneer of the patriarch cracked. "It is not theft if it stays in the family. It is resource allocation. You have excess. She has a deficit. It is natural. It is a crime, Dad." I said forging a signature is a crime. Impersonating another person at a bank is a crime. The line went silent. He didn't ask what signature. He didn't ask what impersonation. He didn't say, "What are you talking about, Brooke?" He just breathed. In that silence, the last thread of my childhood hope snapped. Part of me, a very small, stupid part, had hoped he didn't know. I had hoped he was just a fool, blinded by his love for his golden child. But he wasn't a fool. He was an accomplice. He knew she had used my identity. He might have even driven her to the bank. He justified it to himself the way he justified everything. I was strong. I could take it. I was the mule and she was the show pony. The mule's job is to carry the load so the pony can look pretty. If the mule gets hurt, well, that is what mules are for. Brooke, he said finally. His voice was low, menacing. Don't do this. Don't you dare make this a legal thing. You will destroy this family. You will break your mother's heart. My mother's heart is not my responsibility. I said. My credit score is. It is $75,000. He yelled. You can afford it. We know you can. We saw your car. We saw your clothes. You are selfish. Brooke, you are a selfish, cold-hearted if you report this. If you touch a hair on your sister's head, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead? I have been dead to you for years, Dad. I said. I was just waiting for the funeral. You listen to me. No, I cut him off. You listen. You tell Tessa that the game is over. You tell her that I know about the storage unit. I know about the wig. I know about the rehearsal. And I know that, Brooke, the resource allocation has been suspended. I said permanently. I ended the call. I did not slam the phone down. I placed it gently on the desk. My hand was trembling now, just a little, not from fear. From the sheer massive weight of the severance, it was done. I had cut the cord. I walked to the window. The city lights were blurry. I realized I was crying. Just a few tears, hot and fast. I wiped them away with the back of my hand. They were not tears for my father. They were tears for the little girl who used to fix the faucets. The girl who thought that if she just worked hard enough, if she just fixed enough things, they would finally look at her with love. That girl was gone. I turned back to my desk. The sadness evaporated, leaving behind a crystalline clarity. They thought I was coming for the money. They thought this was a negotiation about $75,000. They thought they could bully me into paying the bill to keep the peace. They were wrong. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the email to Miles. I attached the audio file of the call I had just finished in Georgia. Only one party needs to consent to record a conversation. I was that party. My father had just admitted that the resource allocation was intentional. He had admitted knowledge of the scheme. He had provided the motive and the justification. I typed a single line in the body of the email. Proceed with option B. Full nuclear. I hit send. I was not going to sue them for the money. I was going to sue them for my name. I was going to take back every single letter of Brooke Martin that they had stolen, tarnished, and sold. I checked the GPS tracker one last time. The dot was still at the storage unit. It was time to go back to Greenville. But this time I wasn't going as a daughter. I was going as a prosecutor. The morning sun that filtered into Miles Carter's conference room was sharp and unforgiving, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and the stark reality of the documents spread across the glass table. Atlanta felt a world away from Greenville, but the ghost of my family's betrayal was sitting in the empty leather chair opposite me. Miles paced the length of the room, his shoes making a rhythmic click against the hardwood. He stopped at the whiteboard, uncapped a marker, and drew a straight line down the center. We have reached the inflection point. Brooke, he said, his voice devoid of the usual legal jargon he used to bill corporate clients. You have the admission on tape. You have the tracking data. You have the forged signature. We are no longer gathering intelligence. We are executing a strike. He wrote option A on the left side of the board. Option A is the nuclear button, he explained. We walk into the nearest FBI field office or the Greenville Police Department. We hand them the fraud affidavit, the recording of your father, and the location of the storage unit. They arrest Tessa within 24 hours. She is charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Your parents are likely implicated as accessories. It is fast, it is brutal, and it is public. It ends with your sister in a jumpsuit and your family name in every local newspaper. He paused, looking at me to gauge my reaction. I remained silent, my hands folded on the table. He moved to the right side of the board and wrote, Option B. Option B is the surgical rem. He said, we play the game on their turf, but with our rules we acknowledge the debt exists, but we maneuver to control who owns it. We strip them of their assets before the law strips them of their freedom. We make sure that when the hammer falls, it falls in a way that protects your financial exposure while dismantling their house of cards. Tell me about the debt. I said the loan is toxic. Miles said, capping the marker. Palmetto Regional Lending is a predatory shop, but they are risk-averse. Once they get a whiff of a guarantor dispute, which they will the moment we file the preliminary fraud alert, they will panic. They do not want a lengthy court battle over $75,000. They want their capital back, so they will try to call the loan. I said, exactly. Miles said they will demand immediate repayment. Tessa does not have the money. She has spent the $5,000 she stole from you, and the loan proceeds are likely already earmarked for debts she can't outrun. She will default. And when she defaults, I continued, seeing the board clearly in my mind. They come after the guarantor. Me, unless Miles smiled, a shark-like expression that told me why he was one of the most expensive lawyers in the city. The guarantor is no longer the primary concern because the debt has been sold. I leaned forward. Explain. We form a limited liability company today. Miles said, let us call it Apex Asset Recovery or something equally vague. I act as the registered agent. Your name appears nowhere on the public filing. Apex approaches Palmetto Regional Lending. We offer to buy the note. We tell them we specialize in high-risk debt collection. If they are staring down a fraud investigation, they will sell that note for 80 cents on the dollar just to wash their hands of it. I understood immediately. It was brilliant. It was cold. It was perfect. If I own the debt, I said, I own the terms of the default. You become the bank, Miles confirmed. You become the entity that Tessa owes $75,000 to. You control the timeline. You control the seizure of collateral, and since the loan was secured against the assets of Velvet Rowan Studio, you effectively gain the right to liquidate her business to satisfy the judgment. Do it, I said. You are sure? Miles asked. It will cost you capital up front to buy the note. You are effectively paying off her debt to the bank to gain the right to destroy her. It is an investment, I said. I am not paying off her debt. I am buying the gavel. Miles nodded and made a note on his legal pad. I will have the LLC papers filed by noon. We will make an offer to Palmetto Regional by Thursday. They will bite. They always do. He flipped the page. Now on to the evidence. The private investigator sent over the full report this morning while you were driving in. He slid a manila folder across the glass table. I opened it. The photographs were grainy, taken with a telephoto lens through the gap in a chain-link fence and the open door of a storage unit, but the clarity of the content was undeniable. The unit is a shrine to you, Miles said softly. I looked at the top photo. It showed a plastic folding table set up in the middle of the storage unit. On the table were stacks of paper. The PI had managed to get a high-resolution shot of the top sheet. It was a piece of notebook paper. On it, written over and over again in blue ink, was my name. Brooke Martin. Brooke Martin. Brooke Martin. Some of the signatures were shaky. Some were crossed out. The ones at the bottom of the page were terrifyingly close to the real thing. Practice sheets. I whispered. She spent hours doing this. Miles said this proves premeditation. This isn't a crime of passion or desperation. Brooke, this is a job. She treated stealing your identity like a 9-to-5 shift. I turned to the next photo. It showed a box labeled banking old. Inside, spilling out, were letters with the logo of a bank I had used when I was 22. She kept your old mail. Miles said she intercepted it. You said you thought you lost your statements. You didn't. She has been archiving your financial history for a decade, waiting for the moment you became valuable enough to harvest. I felt a coldness settle in my chest, displacing the air in my lungs. I looked at the images of the boxes, the table, the practice sheets. It was a factory of betrayal. My sister had not just envied me. She had studied me. She had curated a museum of my life solely for the purpose of dismantling it. We need to lock this down. I said, if she gets spooked, if she thinks I'm coming for her, she will burn that unit. She will shred everything. Way ahead of you, Miles said. We are filing a motion for a preservation order this afternoon. It is a legal demand sent to the storage facility and to Tessa personally. It notifies them that litigation is pending and that any destruction of documents, physical or digital, constitutes spoliation of evidence. If she shreds a single receipt after receiving that notice, the judge will instruct the jury to assume the destroyed evidence was an admission of guilt. It handcuffs her. She will know, I said. Once she gets that letter, she will know I am coming. She will know litigation is coming, Miles corrected. But she won't know it is you. The letter will come from Apex Asset Recovery inquiring about the assets of Velvet Rowan Studio. She will think it is a creditor aggressively chasing a debt. She won't suspect her sister is the one pulling the strings until we walk into the room. I closed the folder. The face of the woman in the practice sheets, my name written by her hand, burned in my mind. She expects me to cry, I said, repeating the thought that had anchored me since the night of the theft. She expects me to call Mom and Dad and beg them to fix it. She expects me to be the victim. You are not the victim, Miles said firmly. You are the plaintiff. I stood up. Get the LLC formed, buy the debt, send the preservation letter. I want everything in place by Friday. Friday? Miles repeated. Why Friday? Because Friday is when the landlord threatened to lock her out. I said she is going to be desperate. She is going to try to draw on that loan. And when she goes to the well, I want her to find out the water is poisoned. I left the office and walked out into the bright Atlanta afternoon. The city was bustling, indifferent to the war being waged on a piece of paper in a high-rise conference room. I walked to my car, slid into the driver's seat, and checked my phone. There was a message from Jade. Brooke, I am freaking out. Aunt Darlene just called me. She's crying. She says you threatened Dad. She says you are going to ruin the family over a misunderstanding. I want to go over there and tell them to shut up. I want to tell them I know about the storage unit. Should I? I stared at the screen. Jade was my only ally. Her instinct was to fight, to scream, to defend me. It was a noble instinct, but it was a strategic error. If Jade went to my parents now and revealed what she knew, if she told them we knew about the storage unit, Tessa would panic. Panic makes people irrational. Panic makes people strike matches. I needed Tessa to remain in the state of arrogant denial. I needed her to believe that her father's bullying phone call had worked. I needed her to think that I was cowed, silent, and retreating to Atlanta to lick my wounds. A confident thief is a careless thief. I typed the response slowly. Do not say a word, Jade. Do not defend me. Do not bring up the storage unit. Do not fight them. I paused, then added, let them talk. Let them think they have won. Let them be confident for a few more days. Trust me. I hit send. I could imagine Jade's confusion. I could imagine her frustration, but I also knew she would listen. I started the car. The engine purred, a sound of contained power. I did not feel the rush of adrenaline I usually felt before a big business deal. I felt something deeper, something ancient. I was not happy. Happiness is a light emotion, fleeting and bubbly. This was satisfaction. It was the heavy, solid feeling of a stone settling into place. For 33 years, I had been the extra child, the resource, the backup plan. I had been the one they stole from because they thought I had no value other than what I could give them. They were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. The most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting. It is the one listening. I drove out of the parking garage, merging into the traffic. I had a company to run. I had software to ship. I had a life that had nothing to do with the petty larceny of Greenville, South Carolina. But for the next 48 hours, my life had only one purpose. I was going to buy my sister's debt. And then I was going to collect. The notification that the trap had snapped shut did not come with a bang. It came with a silent digital update on my laptop screen. It was Thursday morning. I was in my office in Atlanta watching the rain streak against the glass. On my second monitor, the dashboard for Apex Asset Recovery, the shell company Miles had registered less than 48 hours ago, blinked once. Status update: loan note 8944B acquired. Transfer complete. Current holder Apex Asset Recovery borrower status default imminent. I took a sip of my tea. It was done. I officially owned Tessa's debt. I was no longer her sister. Legally speaking, I was her creditor. And because Miles had moved with the speed and aggression of a heat-seeking missile, we had acquired the note from Palmetto Regional Lending just hours before they would have sent it to their own collections department. They had been all too happy to offload a $75,000 liability attached to a guarantor investigation for 60 cents on the dollar. To them, it was a loss mitigation. To me, it was purchasing the right to drop the axe. The fallout began exactly 3 hours later. My phone lit up. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, my father called. I let that go to voicemail too. Then came the texts. Brooke, pick up. It is an emergency. They are threatening to lock the doors at the studio. Tessa is hysterical. We need to talk now. I waited. I let them sit in the panic. I let them feel the walls closing in. The specific suffocating terror of realizing that the facade they had polished for so long was cracking under the weight of simple arithmetic. They had spent years believing that money was just something you asked for, something that appeared because you deserved it. Now they were meeting the cold, hard reality of a contract. Finally, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the message I had been waiting for arrived. It was from my mother, but the tone was different. It wasn't demanding. It was manipulative in that soft, cloying way that she reserved for when she had no other cards to play. Brooke, honey, I know we had words, but family is all we have. Can you help your sister just one last time? She is so scared. She made a mistake, but she is young. Please just come home and let us work this out. I stared at the words. She is young. Tessa was 31. She wasn't a child who had broken a vase. She was a woman who had committed felony fraud. But to my mother, Tessa would always be the toddler who needed protection, and I would always be the adult who had to provide it. I typed my reply slowly. I wanted every word to land with the weight of a stone. Okay, I will come to Greenville. We will meet for dinner. I am bringing someone from the lender to discuss the options. I hit send. It was a lie. Technically, Miles was not from the lender in the sense they understood. They would interpret that to mean I was bringing a loan officer, someone I had perhaps charmed or bribed into giving Tessa an extension. They would think I was bringing a solution. They would think I was coming to co-sign officially, to clean up the mess, to use my wealth to make the bad men go away. The response was immediate. Thank God. Thank you, Brooke. We knew you would do the right thing. Come to the house. I type back, no, not the house. Juniper and Stone. The private room in the back. 7 o'clock tonight. I wanted neutral ground. I wanted a place where they could not retreat to their bedrooms or hide behind the familiar comforts of the family living room. I wanted them in a public space, in a room with a heavy door, where the acoustics were designed for serious conversations. Juniper and Stone was the most expensive steakhouse in Greenville, the kind of place my father loved to go to be seen. He would feel comfortable there. He would feel safe, and that was exactly what I wanted. Tessa texted me 10 minutes later. "Thank you. I am so sorry about the confusion. I promise I will pay you back. I have a plan. We just need to restructure the terms. Do not be mad. I love you. I love you." The phrase looked alien on the screen. It was a currency she had devalued years ago. "We will talk at 7, I replied. I left Atlanta at 5. The drive was a blur of highway markers and gray sky. I did not listen to music. I listened to the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. There was a strange sensation in my chest. For years, every trip back to Greenville had been filled with anxiety. The knot in my stomach would tighten with every mile, the dread of their judgment, their dismissal, their subtle cruelty. But tonight the knot was gone. In its place was a vast, cool silence. I wasn't going home to be judged. I was going home to deliver a verdict. I pulled into the parking lot of Juniper and Stone at 6:45. The valet rushed to open my door, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the sleek lines of my car, a vehicle I usually parked around the corner when I visited my parents to avoid comments about showing off. Tonight, I parked it right in front. I checked my reflection in the rear view mirror. I was wearing a charcoal silk blouse and tailored black trousers. No jewelry, no watch. My hair was pulled back in a severe low bun. I wore no makeup other than a touch of mascara. I did not need to look rich. I did not need to look successful. I needed to look like the truth before I got out. I opened my encrypted messaging app. I found Gavin's number. I hesitated for a second. Gavin was a coward, but he was not malicious. He was caught in the orbit of a black hole, and he didn't have the escape velocity to get out on his own. "If you have any conscience left," I typed, "meet me at Juniper and Stone. Private dining room, 7 o'clock. Do not tell Tessa. Just show up." I didn't wait for a reply. I tossed the phone into my bag and stepped out into the night air. The restaurant smelled of wood smoke and aged beef. It was dimly lit, the kind of lighting that flatters aging faces and hides stains on the tablecloths. The hostess, a young woman with bright red lipstick, looked up as I approached. "Reservation for Martin," I said. "Ah, yes, the private room. Your associate is already here." She led me through the main dining room, past tables of businessmen drinking scotch and couples celebrating anniversaries. We walked down a narrow hallway lined with black and white photos of old Greenville back when it was just textile mills and ambition. She opened a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. Miles was sitting at the head of a long rectangular table. The room was soundproofed, the walls lined with dark acoustic panels. A single crystal chandelier hung above the table, casting a pool of light on the polished wood. Miles looked up. He was wearing his courtroom suit, navy blue, sharp enough to cut glass. On the table in front of him sat a single thick file folder. It was closed. "You made good time," he said.
"I drove fast," he sighed.
I sat down in the chair to his right. The chair at the head of the table opposite Miles was empty. That was for my father. "Everything is in order?" I asked, nodding at the file. "Everything," Miles said. He tapped the folder with his index finger. The assignment of debt, the default notice, the preservation order, the affidavit regarding the forgery, and the photos from the storage unit. "Good. They are going to walk in here expecting a rescue mission," Miles said quietly. "You know that, right? They think you are bringing a checkbook." "I know," I said. "It is going to get ugly, Brooke. When the realization hits, People do not react well to the death of a fantasy. I am not afraid of ugly, I said. I have lived in ugly for 30 years. I just didn't have a name for it until now. I poured myself a glass of water from the carafe on the table. My hand was steady. I watched the bubbles rise to the surface and burst. At 6:58, my phone buzzed. A text from Gavin. I am in the parking lot. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. He had come. The witness was in place. At 7 o'clock exactly, the heavy oak door swung open. My father walked in first. He was wearing his Sunday best blazer, the one with the gold buttons. He looked flustered, his face flushed, but he held his head high, scanning the room with that proprietary air he always adopted in public. My mother followed, clutching her purse with both hands. She looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes darting nervously around the room until they landed on me. She let out a breath she must have been holding since the morning. And then Tessa. She looked like a wreck that had been hastily repainted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she had covered the damage with layers of concealer. She was wearing a soft pink dress, something modest and innocent, a costume designed to evoke sympathy. She walked in with her shoulders hunched, playing the role of the victimized waif to perfection. "Brooke," my mother cried, rushing forward as if to hug me. I did not stand up. I stayed seated, my hands folded on the table. "Hello, Mom." She stopped a few feet away, sensing the invisible barrier I had erected. She looked at Miles, then back at me. "Is this the gentleman from the lender?" "This is Mr. Carter," I said. "He is handling the paperwork." "Oh, thank goodness," my father said, striding over to shake Miles's hand. Miles stood up briefly, took my father's hand, and gave it a single, firm shake before sitting back down. He did not smile. "Grant Martin, pleasure. We appreciate you meeting us on such short notice. We are ready to get this sorted out. Please sit down," Miles said. His voice was neutral, professional. They took their seats. My father at the head opposite Miles. My mother to his left. Tessa sat next to Mom directly across from me. So my father began, rubbing his hands together. "We understand there was a bit of a hiccup with the loan verification, a clerical error. Really, Tessa has been under a lot of stress and maybe some wires got crossed. But we are happy to co-sign whatever needs to be co-signed to get the funds released and the account current." He looked at me, beaming. "Brooke has been very successful. She has plenty of assets to cover the guarantee. We are a strong family unit." Tessa looked at me. Her lip trembled. "I am sorry, Brooke," she whispered. "I really am. I didn't mean to cause trouble. The wedding contract fell through and the rent was due and I panicked. But once we get this loan, I can pay everything off. The studio is going to be huge next year. Promise." I looked at her. I looked at the tears welling up in her eyes. Tears that appeared on command, a biological weapon she had perfected in childhood. "You promise?" I repeated softly. "I do," she said, nodding earnestly. "I will pay you back every cent. I just need you to help me fix this. Just this once." My mother reached over and patted Tessa's hand. "See, she is taking responsibility. That is all that matters. Now, Mr. Carter, where do we sign?" "Brooke said you brought the papers." "I did," Miles said. He placed his hand on the thick file folder. He did not open it yet. He just let his hand rest there, heavy and ominous. "But before we discuss signatures," Miles said, "we need to clarify the nature of the transaction." "Clarify away," my father said expansively. "We are all ears." The door opened again. Every head turned. Gavin stood in the doorway. He looked terrified. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt and jeans, looking like he had just run a mile. He was clutching a set of keys in his hand. "Gavin," Tessa gasped. "What are you doing here?" Gavin didn't look at her. He looked at me. You said to come. I did, I said. Come in, Gavin. There is a chair at the end. What is going on? My father demanded, his voice dropping the jovial facade. Why is he here? This is a family meeting. Gavin is part of the story. Dad, I said, he is the one who holds the keys, literally. Tessa's face went white. She stared at the keys in Gavin's hand. She recognized them. They weren't the keys to the studio. They were the keys to a padlock. A padlock on a storage unit. Brooke, Tessa whispered. The sweetness was gone. The fear was real now. What are you doing? I am helping you, I said calmly. You asked for help. You asked for a solution to the debt. Yes, but I have a solution, I said. I nodded to Miles. Miles opened the folder. He didn't pull out a loan modification agreement. He didn't pull out a check. He pulled out a single sheet of paper with a heavy red stamp on the top. Notice of assignment and demand for payment. He slid it across the table toward my father. Mr. Martin, Miles said, my client is not here to co-sign a loan. My client is here because as of 9 o'clock this morning, she is the sole owner of the debt owed by Velvet Rowan Studio. My father picked up the paper. He squinted at it, his brain refusing to process the words. What owner? What does that mean? Who is the owner? The debt was purchased by Apex Asset Recovery, Miles said. Who the hell is Apex Asset Recovery? My father demanded. Miles pointed a finger at me. She is. The silence that followed was total. It sucked the air out of the room. I watched the realization travel around the table like a shockwave. I saw my father's face turn a mottled purple. I saw my mother's mouth open in a silent O. And I saw Tessa look at me with the eyes of a trapped animal who realizes for the first time that the hunter isn't playing a game. You, Tessa breathed. You bought the loan. I bought the note. I corrected her. Which means you don't owe the bank anymore. Tessa, you owe me. But why? My mother stammered. Why would you do that? Because the bank was going to call the police, I said. And I wanted to talk to you first. Talk. My father slammed his hand on the table. You bought your sister's debt. Is this some kind of power trip? You think you can hold this over our heads? I am not holding anything over your head, Dad. I said, I am placing it right on the table. Miles reached into the folder again. He pulled out the photographs from the storage unit. He fanned them out on the polished wood, the practice signatures, the stolen bank statements, the tracking data showing the location of the unit. This isn't a negotiation about a loan, I said, my voice steady and cold. This is an intervention, but not for an addiction, for a crime. Tessa stared at the photos. She saw the picture of her own handwriting practicing my signature. She let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. You followed me, she whispered. I tracked my property, I said. The property you stole from my room while I was sleeping. The property you used to commit federal wire fraud. My father looked at the photos, then at me. Brooke, you can't be serious. You can't use this. This is entrapment. It is evidence, Miles interjected smoothly, and it is currently subject to a preservation order. If anything happens to that storage unit, Mr. Martin, you will be facing charges for destruction of evidence alongside your daughter. You set me up, Tessa screamed. She stood up, her chair knocking back against the wall. You left that money there. You knew I would take it. You wanted me to take it. I wanted to see if you were a thief, I said, looking up at her. You answered the question. Sit down, Tessa. My father barked. She didn't sit. She stood there, trembling, her face twisted in ugly, raw fury. You think you are so smart? You think you can just come in here and buy me? I won't pay you. I won't pay you a dime. Then I will liquidate the studio. I said, I own the debt. I own the collateral. If you don't pay, I take the business. I take the inventory, I take the lease, and I sell it all to recoup my loss. You wouldn't, my mother cried. It is her dream. You can't take her dream. Her dream was financed with my nightmare. I said, I am waking up. I turned to Gavin. He was shrinking into his hoodie, wishing he could disappear. Gavin, I said, the keys. He looked at Tessa, then at me. His hand shook. He slid the keys across the table. They clattered on the wood, the sound echoing in the silence. Thank you, I said. I picked up the keys. I held them up. Now, I said, looking at my family, the people who had taught me that I was nothing unless I was giving them everything. We have two options. Option A involves the police, who are very interested in identity theft. Option B involves you listening to exactly what I have to say without interruption, without excuses, and without lies. I placed the keys on top of the file. Which one is it going to be? The waiter chose that moment to knock on the door. Can I get anyone started with drinks? No one moved. No one breathed. My father looked at the file, then at me, and for the first time in his life, I saw the bluster drain out of him. He looked old. He looked defeated. He waved the waiter away without looking up. Talk, my father whispered. I smiled. And this time, it wasn't a mask. I thought you'd never ask. The waiter closed the heavy oak door, sealing us inside the private room at Juniper and Stone. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the pressurized silence of a submarine diving past its crushed depth. My father, Grant Martin, was the first to attempt to repressurize the cabin. He let out a short, incredulous laugh, a sound meant to signal to everyone that the tension was silly, that we were all just being dramatic. He adjusted his blazer, squaring his shoulders in that way he always did before delivering a lecture. Okay, he said, waving a hand at the file Miles had opened. Okay, very dramatic. Brooke, owner of the debt, I see what you are doing. You are trying to teach us a lesson about fiscal responsibility. Point taken. You formed a company. You bought the paper. Very clever. Now let us stop the theater. He looked at Tessa. Show her the new agreement. Tessa, let us get this signed so Brooke can transfer the what did you call it? The note back to the family trust. Tessa scrambled for her purse. She pulled out a crisp document stapled in the corner. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes held a terrifying spark of hope. She truly believed that this was just a negotiation tactic. She believed that because I had money, I was simply flexing my muscles before writing the check. Here, Tessa said, sliding the paper across the polished wood toward me. I had my lawyer draft this morning. It acknowledges the debt, but it restructures the payment plan. Interest only for 2 years, and it removes the personal guarantee requirement after 12 months. She looked at me, widening her eyes, summoning the ghost of the little sister I used to protect on the playground. Just sign it, Brooke. Please, if you sign this, the default goes away. You own the debt now, right? So you can just forgive the terms. You can make it easy. I looked at the document. It was a joke. It was a piece of paper that essentially asked me to donate $75,000 to her vanity project with no recourse if she failed. I didn't touch it. I think you are confused, I said softly. Confused? My mother asked, her voice trembling. Brooke, honey, just sign the paper. Your father is right. You made your point. I am not here to sign anything, Mom, I said, and I am not here to forgive the terms. I am here to enforce them. Miles leaned forward. He placed his hand over Tessa's document and slid it back toward her. Martin, Miles said, his voice stripping the room of any familial warmth. You seem to be under the impression that Apex Asset Recovery is a vehicle for family charity. It is not. It is a debt collection entity. We are not interested in restructuring. We are interested in collateral. My father's face went from flush to a pale wax and gray collateral. What are you talking about? The loan was secured against the assets of Velvet Rowan Studio. Miles said, since the loan is in default as of yesterday, and since my client now holds the note, we are exercising our right to accelerate the debt. That means the full amount of $75,000 is due immediately if it is not paid. We begin the seizure of assets tomorrow morning. You are going to seize the studio, Tessa whispered. I am going to strip it, I said. The words hung in the air. You can't, my father sputtered. Brooke, look at me. This is your sister. You are going to bankrupt her over money. You have plenty. We know you do. This isn't about money, I said. This is about the signature. I pointed to the file Miles had opened. Show them. Miles flipped the page to the forensic analysis of the loan application. He revealed the blown-up image of the signature line. Brooke Martin written in a hand that tried too hard to be mine. That is not my signature, I said. Tessa flinched. She looked down at her lap. And this, Miles said, flipping another page to reveal the log from the bank, is a record of the signing. Friday, 3:15 in the afternoon. At that exact moment, Brooke was in a board meeting in Atlanta. We have the security footage. I looked at my father. You told me earlier on the phone that someone signed for her. You said it was a family friend. You lied. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The bluster was gone. He looked at the evidence, and for the first time he realized that his authority, the sheer force of his personality that had ruled our house for decades, was useless against a timestamp. And you, I said, turning my gaze to Tessa, you stole $5,000 from my room on Saturday night. You took the cash. You thought I would cry about it. You thought I would make a scene and Dad would call me crazy and it would all blow over. Tessa's head snapped up. The tears were gone. Her face twisted into a mask of pure ugly resentment. So what? She screamed. The sudden volume made my mother jump. So what if I took it? Tessa yelled, slamming her hand on the table. You have so much. I see your clothes. I see your car. You sit in Atlanta in your fancy apartment, and you hoard it. You don't have kids. You don't have a husband. What do you need it for, Tessa? My mother gasped. No, Tessa shouted, standing up. I am tired of pretending. She comes home and acts like she is better than us. She judges everything I do. Yes, I signed your name. Who cares? It is just a signature. It helped me. It saved the business. If you were a good sister, you would have signed it yourself. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You are selfish, Brooke. You have always been selfish. You let me drown just to prove a point. I watched her outburst with a calm that terrified me. I felt nothing. No hurt, no anger, just a clinical observation of a narcissist collapsing under the weight of her own delusion. I didn't let you drown, I said quietly. I just stopped being your life jacket. You are a monster, Tessa shrieked. You are ruining my life over $75,000. That is nothing to you. It is pocket change. It is a felony. Miles interjected dryly. Oh, shut up. Tessa snapped at him. She looked at Gavin. Tell them, Gavin. Tell them how hard I work. Tell them I am good for the money. Gavin didn't move. He sat at the end of the table, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. He looked like a man who was weighing the cost of his soul against the cost of a prison sentence. Gavin, Tessa commanded. Gavin reached into his pocket. He didn't look at her. He pulled out his phone. He unlocked it and laid it on the table facing my father. She sent me this text on Friday, Gavin said. His voice was hollow. My father looked down at the screen. I knew what it said because Gavin had forwarded it to me an hour ago. Don't worry about Brooke. She is weak. She never checks her credit. Even if she finds out, she won't dare sue us. Mom and Dad will guilt trip her until she pays it. We just need to get the cash and she will fold like she always does. My father read the message. His lips moved slightly. She calls you weak, Gavin whispered. She told me you were a cash cow that just needed to be milked. Tessa stared at Gavin. Her mouth opened, but the scream died in her throat. The betrayal was absolute. Her ally, her partner, the man she dragged into her mess, had just handed the knife to me. You, she choked out. I can't go to jail, Tessa, Gavin said, finally looking at her. I can't. They have the storage unit. The storage unit? My mother asked. Her voice was barely audible. Secure keep mini storage? I said, Unit 412. I nodded to Miles. He laid out the photos, the practice signatures, the stolen mail, the boxes of my financial history that Tessa had been hoarding like trophies. This isn't a mistake, Mom. I said, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is an archive. She has been stealing my mail for years. She has been practicing my signature for months. She built a library of my identity so she could use it whenever she needed a loan. My mother looked at the photos. She saw the handwriting, Tessa's handwriting, copying my name over and over again. She didn't look at Tessa with anger. She didn't look at her with disappointment. She put her hands over her face and started to cry. Oh God, she sobbed. If people find out, the neighbors, the church. I watched her cry. Even now, facing the evidence of her daughter's criminality, her primary emotion was social embarrassment. She wasn't crying because I had been violated. She was crying because the image of the perfect Martin family was being stained. It is a misunderstanding, my father said suddenly. He was staring at the photos, his face pale, but his voice had that desperate, stubborn edge of a man refusing to accept defeat. We can explain this, he said, looking at Miles. She was just keeping Brooke's papers safe, that is all. And the signature. Maybe she was just practicing penmanship. You can't prove she meant to defraud anyone. We can fix this. We can pay the arrears on the loan. We don't need to involve courts. We don't need to involve the police. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Brooke, please be reasonable. Misunderstandings happen in families. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor was loud in the room. I walked over to the window and looked out at the parking lot, then turned back to face them. A misunderstanding is forgetting to return a phone call, I said. A misunderstanding is buying the wrong gift. I picked up the photo of the practice sheet. I held it up. A misunderstanding does not have pages of practice signatures, I said. I picked up the photo of the tracking map. A misunderstanding does not have a storage unit paid for with stolen cash. I looked at my father, and a misunderstanding does not involve dressing up in a wig and walking into a bank to impersonate your sister. My father flinched as if I had slapped him. You knew, I said. You admitted it on the phone. You said resource allocation. You said I had excess and she had a deficit. You rationalized theft because you think I exist to serve her. I never said theft, he shouted. I recorded the call. Dad, I said. The color drained from his face completely. He slumped back in his chair, the fight finally leaving him. He looked at the file, at the weeping woman beside him, at the daughter who was glaring at him with hatred, and he realized he had lost. What do you want? He whispered. You own the debt. You have the evidence. You have the recording. What do you want? Tessa looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, fearful. She was waiting for the number. She was waiting for me to say a dollar amount that would make this go away. I looked at them. I looked at the family that had been an anchor around my neck for my entire life. I want to make a deal, I said. Miles pulled the final document from the folder. It was thick. It was bound in a blue cover. Option A, I said, is that I walk out of here, I drive to the police station, and I hand them this file. Tessa goes to prison for 5 to 10 years. You and Mom are investigated for conspiracy. The studio is seized. The house is likely liened. My mother wailed softly. Option B, I continued, is you sign this? I placed the blue document in the center of the table. What is it? Tessa asked, her voice trembling. It is a settlement agreement, Miles said. It states that you admit to the fraud. It states that you agree to the immediate liquidation of Velvet Rowan Studio to satisfy the debt. It states that you accept full responsibility for the loan. And my father asked, he knew there was an end. And I said, it includes a permanent restraining order. It includes a clause that forbids you, any of you, from using my name, my likeness, or my financial information ever again. It requires you to hand over every document in that storage unit to Miles for destruction. I paused. And it requires you to publicly admit that the business failed because of mismanagement, not because of me. You will tell the family the truth. You will tell them I did not refuse to help. You will tell them I stopped the crime. We can't tell people that, my mother cried. They will think we are horrible. You are horrible, I said. I leaned fast on the table, my hands flat on the wood. You have 5 minutes to decide, I said. Sign the paper, dissolve the business, and give me my name back or I make the call. I sat back down. I checked my watch. 4 minutes and 50 seconds. The room went silent, save for the sound of my mother's weeping and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Tessa looked at the pen lying on the table. She looked at the keys Gavin had thrown. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the light of the golden child finally flicker and die. She wasn't looking at a sister anymore. She was looking at a judge. The 4 minutes and 50 seconds of silence that followed my ultimatum were not empty. They were filled with the sound of illusions shattering against the hard surface of reality. My father stared at the settlement agreement as if it were a physical weapon. My mother wept into her hands, a soft, rhythmic keening that usually prompted everyone in the room to rush to her comfort. Tonight, nobody moved. Miles Carter checked his watch. The movement was deliberate, a sharp flick of his wrist that caught the light of the chandelier. Time is up, Miles said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel. We need a decision. Option A or option B. My father looked up. His face was gray, the color of wet ash. There must be another way, he rasped. Family way. We can work out a payment plan, private, between us. No lawyers, no courts. We tried the family way, I said. The family way was you stealing my money. The family way was you forging my signature. The family way was you gaslighting me at the dinner table while you planned to leverage my credit score to save a failing business. It was not stealing, my mother cried, lifting her tear-stained face. It was borrowing. We would have paid it back. With what? I asked. With the profits from a studio that is 3 months behind on rent. With the imaginary revenue from clients that do not exist. I nodded to Miles. Show them the last piece. Miles reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout from the tracking software linked to the serial numbers of the bills I had left in the envelope. This is the tracking data for the cash taken from Brooke's room. Miles explained, we know exactly where the first 3 bills were spent. The timestamp is Sunday morning. 9 of 45 minutes after you took the envelope. He slid the paper toward Tessa. You didn't pay the electric bill with that first $300. I said, you didn't buy groceries. You didn't pay the landlord. Tessa stared at the paper. Her face went pale. You went to the liquor store on Main Street. I said, you bought a bottle of Dom Perignon vintage, $300. My father looked at Tessa. You bought champagne. I was celebrating. Tessa stammered. The loan was going to be approved. I wanted to celebrate the expansion. You stole money from your sister's room, I said, my voice cutting through her excuses like a scalpel. And 45 minutes later, you were popping a cork to celebrate the fraud you were about to commit against her. I looked at my parents. That is your investment. That is the business acumen you have been protecting. She didn't use the money to survive. She used it to toast her own cleverness. The room went deadly silent. The image of Tessa drinking $300 champagne while I was supposedly struggling and misplacing my money was too grotesque even for my parents to rationalize. Sign the paper, I said. If we sign this, my father whispered. Velvet Rowan is gone. The inventory, the brand, everything. The brand is already gone. I said, it is a corpse, Dad. I am just paying for the funeral. Tessa looked at me. Her eyes were full of a venom I had never seen before. It was the hatred of the entitled when they are finally told no. You are so cold. She hissed. You have always been cold. You sit there with your lawyer and your spreadsheets, and you ruin people's lives because you can. You think you are better than us. You are just a sad, lonely with a checkbook. I am not cold, I said. I looked her dead in the eye. I just stopped being stupid. My father picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the tip tapped against the table. I thought he started then stopped. He looked at me and for a fleeting second the mask dropped completely. I thought you would be okay, Brooke. I really did. I knew about the loan application. I knew she was using your info. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I didn't blink. You knew. I let it happen, he confessed. His voice barely a whisper. Because you are strong. You always land on your feet. You have Northline. You have the money. I thought even if she defaults, Brooke can handle it. Brooke can absorb it. But Tessa breaks. She needs help. I was just trying to balance the scales. There it was. The truth I had been digging for my entire life. He didn't hate me. He didn't think I was a failure. He knew I was successful. He knew I was capable and he had punished me for it. He had decided that my stability was a natural resource he could mine to prop up his other daughter's incompetence. He had sacrificed me not because he thought less of me, but because he knew I could take the hit. The scales are balanced now, Dad. I said, sign. He signed. He pushed the paper to my mother. She signed it, weeping softly, her tears leaving wet spots on the blue cover. Then they pushed it to Tessa. She held the pen for a long time. She looked at Gavin, but he refused to meet her eyes. She looked at the keys to the storage unit lying on the table, the physical proof of her premeditation. She realized there was no exit. There was no charm offensive that could work here. There was no tantrum that could change the legal reality of the documents in front of her. She signed. Miles took the document immediately. He checked the signatures, notarized them with his stamp, and placed the folder back in his briefcase. The transfer of assets will begin tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning. Miles said formally, a team from Apex Asset Recovery will arrive at the studio to inventory the goods. You will provide the keys and the alarm codes. Any attempt to hide or remove inventory will be a breach of this settlement and will trigger the immediate filing of criminal charges. He stood up. It is done. My father slumped in his chair. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The patriarch who commanded the room was gone. In his place was a tired old man who had gambled his family's integrity and lost. Are you happy? My mother asked me, her voice trembling with accusation. You destroyed your sister's business. You humiliated your father. Are you happy now? I stood up. I smoothed the front of my trousers. I picked up my purse. Happiness has nothing to do with it, Mom. I said, this is just accounting. I turned to Tessa. She was staring at her hands, the anger replaced by a hollow shock. She had lost her studio. She had lost her credit. She had lost the family narrative that had protected her for 3 decades. The storage unit. I said, Miles will arrange for the destruction of the documents. But if I ever see my name on a piece of paper associated with you again, even a birthday card, I will reinstate the debt. Do you understand? Tessa nodded. She didn't look up. She looked at me not as a sister and not as a wallet. She looked at me as a wall she had crashed into. For the first time in her life, she was seeing a boundary that she couldn't cry her way through. Goodbye, I said. I walked to the door. Miles held it open for me. We walked down the hallway, past the black and white photos of old Greenville. We walked through the dining room where people were laughing and eating, oblivious to the demolition that had just occurred in the back room. We stepped out into the cool night air. The valet saw us and ran to get my car. That went well, Miles said, lighting a cigarette. He didn't usually smoke, but tonight had been heavy. It went exactly as planned, I said. They are going to hate you, Miles observed. They will tell everyone you are the villain. They will spin the story until they die. Let them, I said. I don't care about the story anymore. I own the copyright. The valet pulled my car up. I tipped him $20. What now? Miles asked. Back to Atlanta. Back to Atlanta, I said. I have a company to run and I have a life to live. I got into the car. The leather was cold against my back. I started the engine and the dashboard lit up. A constellation of controls and data. I thought about the smile I had given Tessa the morning after the theft. She had thought it was a smile of submission. She had thought it was the smile of a fool who didn't know she had been robbed. She was wrong. I smiled because I knew. I knew that by taking that envelope, she had given me the one thing I had never been able to get on my own. She had given me the weapon to cut the cord. I smiled because the theft wasn't a loss. It was a transaction. She took $5,000. I bought my freedom, and as I drove out of the parking lot, leaving the weeping, broken remnants of my family in the rearview mirror, I smiled again. It was the best money I had ever spent.